Hello, everyone, and welcome to Classical Revolution on IDAGIO. My name is Rachel Fenlon, and I'm your host of the series. For those of you tuning in for the first time today, this series here is all about risk-taking and rule-breaking in classical music and the importance of innovation. Topics I'm exploring with weekly guests, people who inspire me personally. So I'm really excited to introduce today's guest. He is a Grammy-nominated artist. He is himself responsible for the sort of renaissance of the mandolin in the classical music world on the big concert halls and with orchestras. And he is an exclusive Deutsche Grammophon artist. He's released 5 solo albums under the label and actually just recorded a new album, which will be coming out in November. And I am so excited to welcome Avi Avital. Welcome, Avi. Hi, thanks for coming.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I realized that I prepared everything except of putting this in the plug.
Oh.
So
right. Yeah, you got to put it in. Oh, but I see some nice instruments in the background there.
All right.
Hello.
Howard. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Avi, how are you doing?
Nice. Very good. We just came back from Würzburg, actually, from a little concert we did yesterday for the Mozart Fest. You know, the usual drill, taking the train, checking in a hotel, going to sound check. It was very exciting. It was very exciting to go back to this kind of life.
Was that,
you know, after that long?
Was that the first time you've done that since?
It was, you know.
Okay.
Some things I didn't miss in the tour, but it was
fantastic.
Come again? Yeah.
Oh, we're getting a little, losing you a little there. Can you hear me?
Now, yes.
Okay. Avi, I love to start the show with asking my guests what their first introductions to music were, and what that moment was with music where you really realized that you were going to be a musician.
I think the very first connection that I had to music must have been when I was 5, maybe 6, and we had this in the living room. We had what many houses had in their living rooms in the 80s, which was this organ, this brown huge organ with 2 keyboards and with a with all rumba. You could choose a rhythm like rumba, samba, and with pedals. And haven't seen any organs like that in a while. But I was like just stuck in the living room. I think my parents kind of, or they didn't interpret well. They're like, we need a piano in the living room. But it was kind of, that was the thing. And my older sister played it. She's older than I, so she was already at the age, when I was 5, she was already at the age where she took lessons with a teacher. She, you know, studied music after school, and that was there. And I knew how to switch it on, and I was like just, you know, toying with it a lot. I remember even like inventing some melodies or kind of trying to play the little tunes that my older sister played. Here you go, second child classics.
Okay, and then so what took you from then the household organ to the mandolin?
Yeah, sorry. So the organ was not at all kind of a first love. It was just there in the living room, but it's the first music making that I felt that I'm really doing at the pedals, and I just like love to make music out of it. The mandolin came from nearby, from 1 floor upstairs. That is my neighbor who played the mandolin. Yaki is a bit older than I again, and he went to this youth mandolin orchestra in Beersheba, and also there was no, no one in my family is a musician. The music for my parents, I guess, was just something to do after school, but it could have been anything else, really. And this neighbor, I guess it was just the first time that I could touch an instrument, a real instrument, like there's something very immediate with a pluck strings instrument. There's something so intuitive, because it's just a string, and you take your finger or a piece of plastic, a plectrum, and it makes music, and you see the process. Like a violin, you would have to practice for 3 years until you get a more or less acceptable sound, or woodwinds even. That it's a whole process to produce the sound.
Yeah.
And with pluck strings, it's a genesis in a way that it just, you pluck it and it makes sound. And I know the piano is also like that, but you don't see the mechanics. There is some kind of magic in
There's
there.
a mystery with the piano. Yeah.
So with the mandolin, it was just so immediate, and you take your finger and you make sound, and it was just very charming. And again, I joined this youth orchestra. It never meant to become my profession until I realized it already has become a profession, but I was already 23 years old.
Wow, okay. And I mean, I find it particularly interesting in your case that you really kind of brought this instrument back into the classical music world. I watched some interviews of you previously talking about that, and I was wondering if you could just chat a little bit about what that vision was. Like, did that come from you? And
that was a survival mechanism, honestly. I mean,
okay.
Again, it's like, unlike a lot of my colleagues, becoming a professional musician was never in my menu. Growing up, I grew up in a family that doesn't necessarily have classical music in their culture. Both my parents are from Morocco. They have an incredible culture, incredible musical heritage. It's just not the Western classical music. So like their first concerts of classical music were when I was 11 years old and played my little, recital with the parents or something like that. No one in my surrounding, in my family, through my friends, I come from a relatively small city, so kind of a little bit cut off from the culture center in Israel, which was Tel Aviv, maybe Jerusalem, even Haifa. I come from Be'er Sheva. There was no example of like, you practice now 3 hours a day and then you become a musician. None of that was part of my life. I went to normal high school. I majored in physics and science, and it was like nothing of that was supposed to become my profession. Nevertheless, I liked the music. Was all day long for me, not only the mandolin but other instruments. And the more I practiced, because I loved it, the more I got better in it. And then there were teachers that told me, oh, you should go to this competition and that competition. And so I did. And some of them I won. And then the other teachers told me, if you won that competition, you might as well go to the music academy and go to the other competition, and so on. So in other words, I just found myself in a situation where I am a professional mandolin player. Now, the first reaction that I had to this realization was a complete shock, because I was terrified. Once you go, there is this phase. I mean, I graduated in Jerusalem from Jerusalem Music Academy, and I felt, ready to go on the next stage. And I said to myself, it has to be outside of Israel, explore a little bit, have this experience of living in another country. Italy was my opportunity, because I studied with a real mandolin professor there in Italy, and it was really the excuse for me to experience living in a different culture, different place, and really grow myself as a young adult. So, and for my identity in a way. So but like right after you graduate from school, you realize that until that moment, always somebody else told you what to do every day, and it's kind of this structure is very safety.
Mhm.
Once you're out there, and, supposed to swim for yourself, you're like,
Yeah.
where do I start? I mean, and again, I said to myself, the moment I decided, okay, I'm stopped. I stopped doubting. What do I want to become? I'm like, imagine I'm 21, 22 years old. I had my first year in Italy, and I have to decide practically if am I going to do this as a profession, or there were other things that interest me. And like I hinted before, it was more kind of acceptance of already the reality. I really couldn't. It wasn't a constant prose that didn't help me to look at it like that. But the
Okay.
moment that I accepted myself as a professional mandolin player,
Mhm.
how fine it sounded at the time, it came with a sense of a lot of responsibility, because I said, like, I have to. It's like either I'm like going full on this journey and trying to be the best and trying to really make not only living but make something significant out of it, or I really better change a profession. I cannot be like an mandolin player that plays here and there. Not that other people cannot be. It was just terrifying for me.
Yeah.
And that gave me a lot of drive. That gave me a lot
Yes.
of drive. The reason there also, like, prove other people wrong. Prove my family was always supportive, but they with the same breath they always told me, why don't you learn? Why don't you go to law school or med school and all
Right.
that? Darling people, but I felt like this responsibility of being independent with the profession that I chose against all the odds, and
Mhm.
also show that it is possible, because that's why I chose it, so
Mhm.
it has to be.
Yes.
And that led to, I think, to a lot of the kind of entrepreneur like aspects of my in the early days of my career that forced me to be extra creative and take risks and really reinvent the mandolin in a way that it would appeal
Mhm.
to 21st century concert halls, promoters, orchestras, and so on. Kind of, and yeah, that was the drive. That is still the drive. I'm still feel
Okay.
that I have to prove people wrong, and that you can be a mandolin player.
Sure. It's not a bad thing. Um, my question then would be, well, I have a couple of questions from that, which first would be, you said that you took some risks. Like, what are examples of that, or what, one of the things I was wondering when I was sort of preparing for this interview was, did you face adversity? I mean, maybe not necessarily from home, but even from the early days, from promoters or from people who sort of thought that that wasn't possible, or
Every day,
yeah.
all the time.
Okay.
Everyone is like, it fueled me.
Yeah.
Uh, on one hand, it was never, I never felt like I'm offended with that, but I was like smiling and like
Yeah.
inside, like, challenge accepted. And of course, and at the same time, there were like few people that are very dear to my heart until today that really believed in it and said, like, go for it. It's something that no one else does, and it's not
Exactly.
a disadvantage, it's a great advantage, actually. And I was writing on that, like looking at the whole challenging situation as a big advantage. So I came to a realization pretty quickly that no promoter. Okay, so I was living in Italy and I was starting to get my concerts, but very few at the beginning. And I was sending emails to promoters, and
Sure.
I really, oh, yeah, of course. But I also realized at the same time they were looking at the emails and sitting in their, so like promoters sit in their office and think, we need a mandolin recital in this series. We need a mandolin concerto in this. No one would think about it. And even if they were offered with this, I realized that it's hard. That on the paper it looks funny. It doesn't. You don't have the real imagination of what a mandolin concerto with an orchestra could sound
Exactly.
like. And I don't.
Because it didn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. And if it did exist, that probably wasn't playing on on my favor, because the mandolin has this, or had this, association of being a somewhat limited instrument, more related to folk or to
Right.
something amateur rather, and they didn't come in place to the, like, the shiny concert seasons that people were put. So again, I owe a lot of good people the opportunity, all that people almost blindly gave me,
Mhm.
to perform, to display this art within their structures. But yeah, so I quickly had to kind of grow the ability to explain people, to show, to expose what I'm doing in different manners, so people will start to get the idea of it. And I think the great example of risk taking that I can give, and I talked about it in a few occasions, is my first DG album, which
Yeah.
was because a lot of people say, like, oh, this is a Deutsche Grammophon artist, and easy life is from that point is nice. But that wasn't the beginning at all. So in 2010, I planned, 2009, I moved from Italy to Berlin.
Okay.
Remember that this, Berlin was exploding
Oh, sure.
with artists, and with, like, everyone was there, and it's like I felt like I need to be part of this movement. But I also had, like, really awesome life in Italy. Nevertheless, I at that moment I was turning 30, and I said to myself, what's the next stage? I mean, I could stay in Italy and have more of the same, but I realized that still the mandolin is not picking up as, like, a relevant, or a legit instrument in the big concert hall. Playing at Carnegie Hall recital was science fiction in 2009.
Yeah.
So I said, how do I change it? I need some authority that is bigger than me sending emails,
Yes.
that says this is okay, this is valid. We give
some validation.
Yeah. And also I didn't have management, for the same reason. No management knew what they can do with me. And so I decided to move to Berlin. And I remember saying to myself, like, in 2 years, you have to be on a major label. Because unless you're on a major label, it's going to be just the same. And so the first months in Berlin, I scheduled all these meetings. And I remember I could get a meeting with the CEO of one of the major labels that our headquarters are here in Berlin, prepared, like, really nicely. Ironed my shirt, he had the files and my little curriculum, and went to this meeting. And I was looking at the person in the eye and said, like, I have a great idea for a recording. We'll do Bach concertos on mandolin. And he was like, good luck, and really, wow, and keep in touch and have a great life. So I realized, I realized that this is like, if I come to someone, imagine, like, out of nowhere, and say, like, let's, on this little instrument, say, like, let's make Bach concerto on your label. It's really, I realized, okay, I need I need to attack it in a different way.
Different approach, yes.
Yeah, and then I decided to, which was a formative decision, as it appears, to just produce it myself. I know how it sounds in my head. I have the vision complete. I know it's gonna work. No one else does. And again, I totally understood. No hard feelings, but I knew I had to, again, to take it and to take the initiative and to make it, and then come with a master, so people can hear how it sounds, and maybe that brings that's a bit better. And so I did. I remember just gathering information about what is where's the best place to record in Berlin, what are the best tonmeisters, what are the best recording that these big labels work with, what orchestra is, like, is out there recording for these labels, and I put everything together, like not saving a penny. It was like the best quality production that I could think of. I fundraised this days before Head Starters, but I knew there are some people that supports me, some grants, American Social Foundation. I took a loan. I managed somehow to put this master together, and I swear I had €100 in my bank account going in the studio. It was my parents were supposed to come the week after, but I was at the edge of I put everything in, and this was a really great moment of risk, but gave me so much satisfaction and so much energy. And I remember these days recording Bach in the studio in Aleppostrasse, which is by far my favorite recording place. And I have this Genius Tonmeister and Das Neubronner and Kammerakademie Potsdam, absolutely, one of my favorite orchestras.
Fantastic.
And I'm really poor at the moment, but I'm so happy. And we're doing this music of Bach, and it's just absolutely magical. And the energy in this album, and everyone knew that I'm doing it, that I'm playing all my cards here, and everyone really participated. It was very special. It was still my favorite kind of recording because it has this energy in it. And with the master then, again, I went again to all the labels, and there was a little bit of luck there also, because on the week that I had scheduled all the appointments with the big labels to show them the master, that's exactly the week that I got nominated for a Grammy from out of the blue, pretty much, for a recording that happened in Nexus. That was me playing a piece by Avner Dorman. It was like just kind of somebody out there said okay, this would help you a little bit.
Yes.
And so I got a little bit of media attention and exactly the tailwind that I needed for these meetings, and just everything together geklappt, worked, and Deutsche Grammophon were the one that I had chemistry with. Ske and Michael Lang at the time were the two people to sign me for a longer contract, 5 albums, and from there it was easy. Easier. Never too easy.
No. Wow.
That's a risk taking.
It's a risk taking. That's fantastic. What a story. My goodness. So
not that I recommend any young musician there to spend all their money on producing an album.
Anyone that's listening right now.
But it will, I think the moral is just, if you feel something, if you have a strong intuition about something, then you're probably right. That's that's the moral.
Yeah, I love that. And also I love what you said earlier about challenges, and to not let them, that actually it's possible to perceive challenges as a door opening or as an opportunity. I think what you said. I think that's also really important to remember. And they're not,
yes,
it's not necessarily presented to us in that way, but if it's possible to perceive them like that, then there's no fear really of taking risks.
That's the secret. It's not always possible. Of course, I had and still have some demoralizing experiences where you feel you're held back. No, but it's really like it's a life hack when you kind of turn things around and use you just take the negative and flip it into positive. That's if I could do it in on a daily basis in everything in life, that would be great. But no, this is something that I still I think I have that. in my career, in my musical path.
Well, yeah, I suppose that never really leaves you if that's sort of the mentality that you begin music with. I'm curious now how you feel. I mean, now what's like, where does your vision take you now with what you do? Now that, you're sort of accepted in a way I mean, so how does that grow for you?
That's a very, very good question, because I remember when I was 20, so I was just finishing my studies at the Music Academy in Jerusalem, and I just becoming 20. It's numbers. I'm not superstitious or anything, but I told to myself, until you're 30, you have to. And I remember saying to myself, whatever, playing a year and make an album. Back then, for my 20 years old, again, it was like a very ambitious and very long, far away thing to accomplish. And I did. Before I was 30, I had my first album, a very small boutique label in Italy, La Discantica, and this other little recording for Nexus. And then I turned 30, and I said, like, okay, until you're 40, what are you going to do? And then I had a longer bucket list. It was like, okay, as I mentioned, be on a major label, play at Carnegie Hall, all these symbols that we give ourselves.
Yes.
Play at Wigmore Hall, do this, do that, and so on. And then I turned 40, what was it, 2 years ago, and I'm like, okay, everything pretty much checked. Proud to say that every concert hall that I wanted to play in the world, pretty much, more or less, I played. Nice. Now what?
Yeah.
And that was even more scary than the resolutions that I had turning 30, because it's really okay now. Really, now what? Again, it's like the more of the same syndrome that I'm afraid of, and I had a lot of answers to myself. I wanted to explore branches that developed throughout these years that I kind of sampled, and I really wanted to kind of explore these roots for my own ensemble. Explore more writing, and the one project I did with a jazz player, with Avi Avital, was mind-blowing for me, and it's something I definitely wanted to do more of, that direction. And I had all these great ideas, and I'm still working on them. It's like, there's a different way to kind of fulfill those dreams, and I'm still studying myself also as in these lenses, but I definitely have a plan for until.
I mean, I really like this analogy you just gave of the branches, because it's like the tree grew, and then you get to sort of explore the things that felt really authentic during certain experiences. I was wondering about, I'm so curious about repertoire with the mandolin. And for example, is it sometimes as simple as that you can hear a piece and think, I want to play that on the mandolin, and then you either transcribe it yourself, or because then I suppose it just seems there could be a whole world of music to explore.
It used to be very easy. I think this is something, again, that when you're young and fearless, you don't think twice. You have nothing to lose. So I was playing pieces for violin and so on. And I think, for example, that very first Bach album I talked about before, I transcribed a concerto. So the easy way to do is to transcribe from violin to mandolin. That's easy.
Yes, that's what I assumed. Yeah.
The same. It's never arranging. You play from the score of the violin.
Yeah.
Some pieces for the violin work and some not. Some romantic repertoire is so violinistic that it just sound really funny on a mandolin.
Mm.
Others sound sometimes better. I like Bach violin pieces on the mandolin a lot because it has some. It zooms out from the violin to something with. For me, again, sorry if I'm for something with much more structure and ability to see the piece, the architecture of the piece with more clarity. I'm talking about for example, the chaconne or other.
Yeah, I heard that recording today.
Parts from the from this book, right? So, but I remember the first piece on the album is the harpsichord concerto, E minor. So probably the best piece ever written on the face of Earth, and objectively. And
we can fight about it later.
and I really wanted to play it because I was looping this piece in my headphones like forever. And it's just a brilliant piece of music, and it came from just the need to play it, even though it's written for harpsichord. I think that was a bold move back then. Now when I look at pieces, I'm like, I think, okay, now what would people think? Is this silly? Is this not? Yeah, I think, but this is something that this, Corona lockdown also kind of shuffled the cards for me in this sense.
Okay.
Yeah, because I looked at the opportunity to have like 3 months or 4 months without deadlines, without preparing to the next concert, and that was a gift. And I picked up like some new repertoire that my young self would pick,
Okay. Oh, interesting.
And I've been studying this. One of them is Rondo Capriccioso by Saint-Saëns, which is absurd. Like some of the notes I don't even have on the mandolin. I didn't get to the end of it. I'm studying like very structured, very slowly, section by section. Again, in a new method that I'm allowing to myself because of this wide time spread that I have. This is a luxury, and so I'm studying things really in the foundation of them. So it's an extremely, extremely difficult piece, and I decided this would be my Corona challenge, together with the cello suites by Bach.
Wow!
So like training to read a C clef for me for the first time, and all this kind of challenges, and this is such a fresh air for me, and also to this like pressure that I put on myself. Now you're 40. What's next? What do you do? How do you reinvent yourself? It was a nice time to reflect on that and to step back and go through.
And just be more objective about who you are as a musician, or what the music is, or what's speaking to you.
Totally. It's been so important.
That's wonderful. That's really beautiful. Well, I think we're kind of slowly running out of time, but I have 2 more questions for you. So one, with this can be a short one, but I've got your playlist today, and everyone who's watching, make sure you listen to Avi's playlist, which is linked to this episode. It's beautiful, and I found it quite surprising because you had so much piano repertoire, and I was surprised by that. So I was wondering if you could.
I have the set list. It was really interesting because I wanted to make a playlist that of pieces that are meaningful for me.
Yeah.
And that play a role in my formation as a musician, and pieces that I loved all the time. And
so you have Prokofiev in there.
I have Prokofiev is for my teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do a quick guide to 10 tracks of to the inside of So I started with Agnus Dei, this specific recording of John Elliott Gardner. From the Mass in B minor, of course, by Johann Sebastian Bach, is the one piece that on cue put tears here, and it's just infinitely beautiful. I can never have enough of this piece. There are two pieces that I put because they are in my younger, like as a young, I was in high school when this came out, but that related to two films that really influenced me. Two films about music. One is Tout le matin du monde, about Marat Marais and Musée de Saint-Colombe. This is a beautiful French film that is a must for everyone
Okay.
who likes music. Have you not seen it?
No, I'm going to write it down.
Jordi Savall did a soundtrack, obviously, and it got very famous for that. For other things, sorry, not because of that film, but he kind of put the viola da gamba music in the front. It's it's about this real character that lost his wife and kind of retreated himself with grief into just music making with two younger girls. He's like kind of moved from his house to a small garden house and just do music from morning like to night, just to get out of the grief and to create himself a little heaven. And this approach to music as a religion and as something extremely spiritual, that you dedicate your whole being into it, was inspiring for me. And I kind of echoed with this like religious approach to music that I have. Otherwise, I'm not a religious person, but when it comes to music, it really influenced me and inspired me. The other story that was told very nicely through a movie is Shines, and that's why I put the Rachmaninoff third movement of a concerto.
Nice.
It's another story about a young musician that is obsessed with music, that is obsessed with peace, and in that case, it kind of messes him up quite a bit, and also kind of this relationship with there is this father figure in the film who's a Holocaust survivor, and a lot of the kind of the father's dream and the father's being very complex and person with issues influenced the young adult. And I was recognizing one of my teachers, who's by far, one of my the reasons why I'm a musician in the first place, was my first teacher, Simcha Natanson, who was also a Holocaust survivor, and I didn't understand it at the time. I was from 10 years old to when I was 14, I studied with him. A huge musician, but there was this thing, there was this story there that then when I watched it on the big screen, some other story I could immediately resonate. So that's why Rachmaninoff is there. And Prokofiev is there because of my teacher Moti Schmidt. Later on, I went to study in the music academy in Jerusalem with a violin professor, because they didn't have a Mandarin professor. It was a David Oistrakh student himself, like a Russian Jewish violinist.
Nice.
So Shostakovich, Prokofiev, he didn't know even how to hold a Mandarin, so we would sit in the class and would talk only music to me, only phrasing, only nothing technique about it for 4 years. And that was amazing. And he sent me poems to read, and he sent me like, you have to sit, like, you're not going to play this piece until you read that book and you read this poem and you go to this theater. And really grew the culture that was the symbol of this kind of, again, the Moscow school.
Yeah.
So this is why I put Gidon Kremer and Marta Arger's a little bit from that kind of clique, and Prokofiev. I could go on. I don't know. There is.
I mean,
there are a lot of you exploring. You can have a guess of why did I put certain pieces and why they mean to me.
Well, the Chopin puzzled me.
Oh yes.
Just because it seemed,
I know.
But then I thought maybe he wanted to play it on the mandolin one day. I'm not sure.
No, so this is this brings me back to the youth mandolin orchestra and Simcha Natanzon, which was this tough teacher. He's also from Russia, a Holocaust survivor, was very tough on us, but infinitely musical. And it's a very touching story because he also was not a mandolin player, he was a violinist from St. Petersburg. He immigrated to Israel in the 70s and applied for a job in the local conservatory as a violin professor, which they didn't have. They already had a violin professor, but they offered him to start a mandolin orchestra because, I don't know, they had like mandolins in the basement. They didn't know what to do with it. He forms a mandolin orchestra, even though he doesn't know how to play the mandolin.
Wow.
Yeah. And he teaches all of his students, for example, this is a plectrum, just to illustrate, again, this could be another half an hour of experience.
Right.
In all over the world, string players hold a pick like this, right?
Yeah.
Because Simcha Natanzon didn't know how to hold a pick because, you know, he was a violinist. When he saw a pick, he decided to hold it like this. And you know, and I hold it obviously like this. And
Yes.
everyone from Be'er Sheva, from that school, hold it like this. And if you go in the world, you see a mandolin player that holds a pick like this, you can say you're from Be'er Sheva, and you will not.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, and the charming thing is that always me, the other classmate, I was the last generation. So he started in the 70s. He retired with me being the very last generation of mandolin players. The orchestra at that time was like the pride of the city, and he was sitting with us with the orchestras. We were all holding mandolins, but in his mind, there were never mandolins.
Okay.
All violins. You see what I mean? So
yeah, I actually do. Yeah.
when he taught us the repertoire in music, it's like the fact that we were holding a mandolin was a little uncomfortable, but you know, a detail. But you know, never mind. It's what we have. That's not the important thing. And so he arranged some amazing repertoire for us, the kids in the orchestra, to play together. And one of the first that I played as a kid, was this valse. And I remember that, so imagine this beautiful valse on piano, played by orchestra of 40 mandolins, mandolas, guitars, and a double bass. And he was such a musical genius, this teacher who was conducting this orchestra, that I remember like being carried away, the feeling of being carried away with the valse. You know, it's the feeling that you have this, you spin out of control in some of the Chopin valses. And I remember this so powerful, and I remember his eyes, was maybe 12, 13 at the time, just conducting this orchestra, and you realize that the whole room is like spinning out of control with the joy of this culture. And that was just such a powerful musical experience that I decided that I put it there, but no one didn't tell you the story.
I'm so glad you told that story, because you would never imagine this from a Chopin waltz, you know? Fantastic. Well, I think that brings me to my last question, which is sort of comes from the title of the series, and it's something that I like to ask the musicians that come on the show, and it's when and how do you feel music can be revolutionary? When have you experienced that?
I had predicted you would ask that, and I spent the whole day trying to find a really smart answer.
Okay.
But I don't know if I have one, because for me it is clear that it has the power to do so. At the same time, we're talking about a traditional art form, and I think there is a difference between a creator and a performer. You see, so I have this kind of I'm the performer. I'm the waiter. You give me the food, I serve it to the table. I do this very well, but I didn't prepare the food. No, it's not to downgrade the
Except choose the food.
not to or cook for by a recipe.
Yeah.
But there is I know being a servant is divine for me. I mean, God is a servant too. Everyone is a serves, and I'm proud in mastering this art and in the notion of this is what I go when I walk on stage. I serve with people. I generate an experience for them, not for myself. Being a creator, a composer, is just a different profession. It's a different being. It's more than a profession. And I feel that there you really have power to make revolutions. I go back to my set list and I put there Mikis Theodorakis, a canto general that he wrote for words by Pablo Neruda. Both Pablo Neruda and Mikis Theodorakis, anti-capitalists, proud communists. You read the text, and I put it because it was one of my first, I played in a production that put together this piece, a bouzouki, not even a mandolin. But it has this integration because Theodorakis put there a lot of folk instruments, and it's kind of echoes also with things that I since then really like to do. Nevertheless, this for me is an epic piece that has a very strong upfront saying, which I absolutely adore. And sometimes in the role of being a performer and trying to accommodate, the situation for a lot, and maybe a lot of times I say to myself, we should be more, as an artist, more outspoken about things that are unjust in the world. But there is this thing also in classical music, you don't push things too far, and the conflict that I'm living with, and that I feel that the creator has much more power to do and much more responsibility to do, and for that I'm infinitely jealous in everyone who can create in this.
Interesting. And so in that sense, perhaps as the performer, your role is kind of, you can choose to perform those compositions or commission those compositions, or
yeah, for sure. I mean, a revolution is a big word.
Yes, it's a big
word, and I think in my little the little that I can make in my little box of being a mandolin player that had the luck to be able to perform to a lot of people is to introduce something new to the audience. This is what I always say. This is something that maybe I did good in my life. A lot of people didn't hear the mandolin, and now they can hear it. Call it a revolution, I don't know.
No, but that's very interesting about your thoughts about composers and how that responsibility, how you feel that responsibility translates or weighs more on them. It's interesting.
Yeah, and it's a wake-up call for me, because when I heard today, when I listened to Canto General, I was thinking, what are my favorite pieces? What are formative pieces for me? And it's like Canto General, because of several reasons we don't won't have the time to go into, but I felt suddenly, so given the current events and everything, I felt like, wow, I'm so small. Like, these people really stood up for something and were able to spread it to to hundreds of thousands through music. And not only them, but all through them. And even now, I'm following Billie Eilish on Instagram, and this is wow, this is how things should be. She's outspoken, and she knows she's popular, and she has probably something to lose, but she's not afraid, and it's full of bad language, stories. But she's there, and she by that obviously influencing people, at least to think whether what she says is right or wrong.
Yeah,
this is something I hope I can do better.
Avi, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having you here. And
thank you.
Thank you. Very inspiring.
Thank you very much.
So Thank you, Avi, and thank you everyone for tuning in. And
Thanks everyone for watching this.
see you
Take
next
care.